So hi to everyone who is joining us virtually on this year's fourth GDS Open Show and Tell. Um, so my name is Shah, and I am the Service Manual and Standards Support Officer. And I've got two amazing people here with me, with everyone else here as well, who's going to be introducing themselves. So over to you, Martin.
Hello everyone. Yes, I'm Martin Jordan, Head of Service Design at GS. And the only thing I'm going to do now is quickly tell you what you can expect from the next 90 minutes or so. So we'll do have a bit of an intro and an overview of Services Week, because this session here is part of Services Week 2021. So you'll hear from Lisa and Shah about that in a moment. Then we'll hear a number of fantastic presentations. So first we'll hear from Anna talking about GovUK accounts. Then Ignacia will be talking about starting a business as part of gov.uk. Then Thaís is going to talk about standards assurance and what the continuous improvement team has been doing in that space. We'll hear from Rosie and Tim about the GovUK design system. Ariana will speak about remote accessibility research. And Steve and Antonia will talk about the latest in GovUK Pay, followed by Harry Voss talking about collecting infos from users, a discovery. So we have quite a bit of agenda here. We'll have short talks, and there will be hopefully time for one question or so per speaker. So we'll always move on swiftly. And yeah, great to have you all here. And back to you, Shah.
Thanks. Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Jeffery. I'm really Regional Relationship Manager for Government Digital Service, GDS. Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
Cool. So just going to skip through. So questions can be answered via this little link here, sli.do, and you can submit your questions via the code #showtell. You can also upvote any burning questions that you have that you'd like to be answered. And I'll be picking one or two top questions depending on the time we've got. Just to note that most teams have been blogging about their work, and there are many blogs in the pipeline, all related to the topics that we'll be covering here today. So be rest assured that if there's anything that isn't addressed straight away, it will be addressed either directly in the blogs itself or in the comment sections of the blog posts. So if you go on to the next slide. This year we had our third annual Services Week going through from March 1st to March the 5th. This was a session. The sessions that we had were a part of the Services Week 2021 across organizational UK public sector event series. And this year it was done remotely. It was an annual self-organized week of events. Martin, if you can go to the next slide, please. And what we were trying to do was discuss what good, accessible, equitable, and sustainable public services look like. So this year, we have had an amazing 56 sessions organized by 37 public sector organizations. And these sessions took place in the following formats. So we had show and tells like this one, we had case study presentations, and we had a little bit of innovation where we were testing out audio sessions. Roughly, we had around about 3,000 people from public sector attending these sessions. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. So just to bear in mind that this session will be recorded and your display name might be visible in the recording itself. So by participating in this session, you're giving consent. Just to note that you can share your thoughts and impressions on our social media, using the hashtag Services Week. And we can answer any questions or anything that's popped up through this hashtag. So moving on, before we begin, just to address this question. So what is Services Week and why does it actually matter? So I'm just going to hand it over to Lisa, who will give you a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, it's good to start with why. Thanks, Shah. So we covered some sort of reflections from people who attended sessions this week. And on the next slide, this is a quote that was gathered during the feedback. So Services Week makes work visible across the public sector, helps join us all up and enables sharing, learning and new connections that can have a positive impact beyond the week. So that's a little bit of feedback. And then we've got a couple more quotes here from people who attended sessions. I love to hear what other services are discovering, how user needs are being met and challenges overcome. Also helpful to learn about any new tools colleagues are using. It's a great showcase of some of the incredible things we're doing in government. And I think we just got one more. I learned so much from the experience of those who've gone before me. It helps me improve the work I do in my organization. So that's what it's all about. And that's why we're here. And if we move on, so indeed, how does Services Week connect to the work we do every day? Well, it reflects the value, the sticker there on the screen, making things open makes things better, from the government design principles. And if we, on the next slide, we can see that we've produced some blogs this week. Folks have been writing about the brilliant work that they're doing, how they're making space for user-centered service transformation, and sharing how we're overcoming challenges so that we can learn from each other. And there's been some lovely creativity too, as Shah mentioned, in the sessions that we that have been run this week, including this audio-only session illustrated there on the future of tax a year on. And that was super popular with around 200 views in only 3 days. So great diversity of sessions that have taken place this week, and thanks to everyone who's been involved. And over to you, Martin, I think now.
Yes, let's go on with the show. Let's get started. So our first speaker is Anna Goss. Anna Goss is a lead service designer on gov.uk. And Anna is going to talk about gov.uk accounts. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Martin. Let me just share my screen. How's that? All good?
That works, yes.
From Lisa, thank you. Cool. So hello, everyone. I'm Anna Goss. I'm a lead designer on gov.uk. I've worked at GDS for just over 3 years, worked on gov.uk Verify and also on the GDS international team. But for the last year, I've been working on gov.uk, currently working across accounts and data. And today, like Martin said, I'm going to talk about accounts. So I'm going to talk about why we've created accounts, how we've made a gov.uk account, and how it's now being used in the live trial. And I'm going to talk about some of the user research behind the account and how we designed it. But first, though, I want to ground it in some of the strategic context. Gov.uk recently launched an ambitious future strategy. We want gov.uk to provide trusted, joined up and personalised interactions for users so that we can provide the right things to the right people in the way that they want to use them. And one way we're delivering on this strategy is our work on gov.uk accounts. We want to make government easier to navigate. We know that users don't go to gov.uk to browse, they go because they need to find things out and get things done. But at the moment, any visit to gov.uk is like starting from scratch. We think that we can help users to find and understand information better if we remember some things about them with the user's consent. So our work is in its early stages. We're trying it at the moment on the Brexit Checker, and as it goes on, we're doing a lot of testing and iterating to keep the product user-centered. We are blogging a lot about it, so mostly on inside gov.uk, the gov.uk blog, so you can go and have a read about more detail because this is just 10-minute snapshot. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the strategy before I go into the specifics of the account. We're at the stage with gov.uk now where it works well if you know what you want to do or if it's a discrete task or action. Over the 8 years that gov.uk has been around, we've worked really hard to get it to this place of being trusted and user-centered. But 8 years is a really long time in technology terms. Gov.uk launched in October 2012, at which point putting all government content from nearly 2,000 government websites in one place was totally transformational. But in those 8 years since, user expectations have changed. Like I said, gov.uk works really well for finding discrete transactions or particular pieces of information. but it doesn't work so well for navigating more complex areas that go across different parts of somebody's life or work. And in internet terms, thinking about outside of government, it's now pretty common for data about a person to be combined with data about a thing to give personalized interactions. We've moved away from the web being this kind of flat thing, and it's now a much more kind of interactive space. So for example, if people want to travel from one location to another, you can combine public transport APIs and location data for accurate scheduling. Or if you're looking for food, you combine location data with restaurant data and you get your delivery times and your menus and so on. So people are expecting to be able to do more online and for those transactions to be low friction and somewhat personalized. We want gov.uk to be fit for the internet of today and tomorrow, which is why we're now thinking about these things. So our vision is for more personalized services that help governments solve whole problems and meet users where they are. Our users often have complex journeys that include multiple organizations, services, and touch points, like starting a business or having a baby. And for big and cross-cutting events like Brexit and COVID-19, users might be unsure about what they need to do. So understanding how users navigate government is essential to addressing failure demand and ensuring effective policy implementation. So an example of this kind of cross-cutting event is the Brexit Checker. It's the first time at scale that gov.uk had been able to provide a semi-personalised service on a whole topic, and it received a really positive response from users. So there's big policy changes like Brexit and COVID-19, where people need to interact with government a lot. We can see that people have to start from scratch every time, have to remember which policies or services they were looking at and try to piece things together for themselves. And we want to change this. We think it needs to be better. So we want to provide those joined up, trusted and personalized interactions for users, help people navigate gov.uk as quickly and easily as possible, and ensure we can proactively support their needs without them needing to understand the structures of government or explicitly know what service they're necessarily looking for. And we know that this is going to take a lot. It's going to be new ways of thinking about content, digital and technical expertise, making better use of data, new ways of collaborating across government, but we are up for the challenge and our work here has already begun. We're doing a bunch of stuff to try and get to this vision. So Ignacia is going to talk to you in a moment about starting a business, for example, which is one piece of work going on across gov.uk to try and get to this joined up, trusted, personalised vision. But I'll talk about the gov.uk account. You can see a snapshot of it on the slide here. So I've set the context. Let's talk about the account. We started small. We made the first release of the account trial back in November 2020 on the Brexit Checker. It's essentially a login function that lets you save your answers, receive notifications if information changes, and provides you with that personalized set of results based on the answers you've inputted into the checker. You might have even tried it yourself in the last few months. And its goal is to help towards that overall goal of joined up government. Our hunch is that if we can give you some persistence across visits to gov.uk and perhaps store information about you alongside that, we can help with a more joined up experience. So a gov.uk account should make it easier for people to find the right information at the right time. I'm going to talk now a bit about the trial so far and how we researched and designed it. As I said, this is just a 10-minute presentation, so go and read all our blogs about the rest of the work that the team are doing. So we wanted to test the gov.uk account on a service and see how users interacted with it. We chose to add it to the Brexit Checker because it addresses what we call that whole problem on gov.uk. So something that normally affects users over a long period of time, not a fixed standalone transaction with government, and made up of this series of complex transactions and pieces of guidance from lots of different parts of government. Here's some screenshots from the trial. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the design considerations that went into this. So we knew that going back to your stored answers on the Brexit Checker was not going to be useful to all users. And we knew as well that a user for whom it wasn't useful might actually find it a little bit underwhelming, but we had to start somewhere. On that basis, we decided we were going to be super clear about what the account can do now, while at the same time outlining what users might be able to do with it later. We had a hypothesis that said, we can't deliver all of the value of accounts in one go. We have to take an iterative approach. We can't promise everything up front, and we'll need to manage expectations. If we clearly explain that accounts are a work in progress and they will increase in use value over time, then users will trust us more and be happier to sign up for and use an account because we'll be managing their expectations better. Based on this hypothesis, we decided to be upfront about specific value users participating in the trial would get out of an account right now. We called out that it was a trial and we told people about things they might be able to do in the future. We wanted to make sure that users were aware of what they were signing up for and that we weren't overpromising. We knew as well that privacy would be really important. So if users are inputting their data, they need to know not why, and we need to respect their privacy. We wanted to take a privacy first approach, and we thought really hard about how to get people engaged with privacy as a concept. We found that some users just click straight through saying, you know, oh, this is just standard GDPR stuff. But others were a bit more critical of early prototypes where they weren't given much control over how the account would use their information. So one iteration we've made is to introduce radio buttons to encourage users who are kind of rushing through this part to slow down and engage with the privacy aspect of the account. And at the same time, we're making sure that the detail is there for those who want it or who are seeking further reassurance. And we've taken all that privacy, security-centered approach stuff and approach into the account itself, not just the terms and conditions, and then you never see it again. A really transparent security screen showing which services have used information about you and where you've been signed in. Setting out our stall early on things like how your data has been used means that as we go on, security, transparency, and privacy will be at the core of what we do. As the trial continues, we wanted to make sure, of course, that we were continuing to hear from our users, seeing what's working and what's not working so well, and iterating based on our observations. For example, we pretty soon learned that users based abroad initially couldn't use our two-factor authentication, which was just a text message sent to their mobile number, because we hadn't set it up for international numbers. So we pretty swiftly shipped that change. And we're working on ways to make the account easier to access. So for example, we've just been in research last week on using a voice call to a landline instead of a text message for two-factor authentication for people who live in an area without much mobile reception or maybe aren't able to receive text messages. We've also shipped a show password function after feedback from users who found it helpful to see what they were inputting into the password field. So the trial's carrying on, we're still improving it. It's going to be a long road. The Brexit Checker is really just one slice of what we hope an account will be able to do on for users on gov.uk in the future. And we're really just at the beginning of all of that. So we're starting to look at other ways that an account applied on that publishing platform of gov.uk could deliver value for users. So keep an eye on inside gov.uk, the blog, have more detail on the work. And we are going to be hiring a bunch soon. So keep an eye on civil service jobs. And that's it. So thank you for listening and happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna. I think Shah and Lisa are going to have a look at sli.do. There is one question. Shah, do you want to read it out?
Yes, to you, Anna, as well. Do you have plans for merging gov.uk accounts with other services, as one user could have multiple accounts for different services across the same provider? It's a very interesting question.
Hi, sorry, I had a Zoom screw up. Did I miss a question?
I'll just repeat that for you again, Anna. Do you have plans for merging gov.uk accounts with other services, as one user could have multiple accounts for different services across the same provider?
I don't know what provider means in this context, but yeah, ultimately the kind of end game vision on gov.uk is one account for all of government. So being able to sign into multiple services with the same login, that kind of, there's I think north of 100 accounts across different government services, and we think that might be a few too many. But we're starting very much on the publishing platform and working with colleagues across the rest of government and gov.uk to figure out. Will we have to try and remember a government gateway ID to log in still? To be confirmed. I have a feeling that I don't know the answer to that question. I think there's a big conversation going on across government around digital identity, as usual. I can say that having worked on Verify, and I think it's all up in the air. I do know that the spend review had north of 30 million quid this year for digital identity to kind of look at one digital identity solution for all of government. Maybe that's going to be government gateway, but it might be something else. I don't know.
Cool. Martin, over to you.
I was just wondering if we can quickly take this one as well, and then we move on.
Yeah, devolved on local government. I don't see why not. It would probably be a little, I mean, we haven't even got proper basic functionality of an account on gov.uk yet, so we're very much focused on the publishing platform at the moment. But I think, you know, we definitely saw in Verify when I worked on that there was kind of a need for that identity assurance and authentication thing across local authorities as well. So it's definitely like an area of interest in the future. But equally, I know that, you know, Scottish Government have got their own login functions and things like that. So probably an unfolding conversation.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you so much. That's been really, really interesting. And now we'll hear from Ignacia, who's a senior service designer on gov.uk, working on start a business and also sustaining a business on gov.uk. So over to you, Ignacia.
Cool. Let me show my screen. You know, can you see?
Yes, that works.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Martin. Hello. Well, as Martin said, my name is Ignacia. I'm a senior service designer working in GDS, currently in the gov.uk program and the Start a Business team. So for the last couple of years, we in GDS have been exploring new ways of organizing and working across whole user journeys and services from a user point of view. And these ultimately cross multiple organizational boundaries. More recently, a team on gov.uk program has been doing some exploratory work to understand how we in gov.uk might support departments working on these big whole user journeys. And we have been using the starting and sustaining a business as a test case, as this involves multiple tasks and departments across government. So we're working on this because tasks that users want to complete involve many organizations across the public sector. So for example, in the starting a business space, there are more than 10 different departments, agencies involved in designing and delivering parts of that user journey. The way that government is structured at the moment kind of generates some silos, meaning that user interaction with government are not always connected. And this could potentially mean that users miss crucial information or steps that they're not familiar with if they're not like subject matter experts in, for example, starting a business. We often work at a transaction or activity level in government if you're in the delivery space, or at a policy intent level for policymakers. For example, on the slide, we can see an example of services, transactions, and activity around learning to drive. We need to be designing ways in which we can join up the policy intent with what the user is actually trying to do. In this example, learning to drive. Which is why we have been exploring ways we can better join up at a service level for users. So this is who is on the current team and starting a business in gov.uk. You can see it's quite multidisciplinary and user-centered. We have from product delivery manager, performance analysts, service designers, front and back-end developers, user researchers, content designer, and policy and strategy colleagues. So today I'm representing the work of the entire team. So my team's focus is on starting and sustaining a business user journey. And this is helping us to look in ways that we can improve many different complex areas on gov.uk in the future. For the starting a business, we're trying to understand how might we help businesses succeed, why they potentially might fail or could fail, and how government can improve the user journey. We want to use gov.uk's central position in government to see how we can help. From scoping a whole user journey to developing insights using quantitative and qualitative data, exploring how to make better use of data to make tasks easier for users, all the way to governance models for cross-government collaboration. So now I'm going to give you like a little quick overview of the work that we've been doing so far. So we started by zooming out and trying to understand what is actually in the startup business space. We wanted to have a clear picture of what starting and sustaining and growing a business looks like. Where does it start? Where does it end? And what are all the tasks and guidance and services that government provides today in this space. So we started looking at information across the entire gov.uk and divided this into high-level stages, as you can see in the image. The starting stage, where you actually register your business, is a bit more straightforward. But once you've registered and need to start understanding what licenses and permits and things you need to do in order to get ready to operate, the journey becomes much more complicated for users. And it's not linear at all, how we show in this diagram. This was a really useful thing for us to do as a team and for stakeholders to actually acknowledge that starting a business is much wider than just setting up a company, for example, and that we have to be aware of what comes after and what comes before. And that we also might have to zoom into particular aspects to experiment and explore to start with. We then started mapping the service landscape for starting and sustaining a business across gov.uk. This involved looking at all the different stages and steps that users starting a business might have to take on gov.uk, from registering for the first time, to getting ready to operate, to actually running their business. We identified that the main tasks on gov.uk, we pulled out the main pages of guidance, transactional services, and tools, and we mapped them against in a big spreadsheet, as you can see in the image. And we also mapped all the departments involved in the delivery space. This really helped us understand the space, what government provides today for businesses, and an idea of which departments and service teams we could reach out to start thinking about improvements to the user journey. So in the background image, you can see this is a bit of the service mapping we did using a spreadsheet. And you can see there's an overwhelming amount of content and information about running your business on gov.uk at the moment. So the work that we did on service mapping, followed by looking at quantitative data and user research analysis, led us to identify some improvements to the user journey. But we are also trying to use new data science techniques to think about end-to-end journeys through both content and services. So using data to visualize and map those journeys. We've been trialing tools to help us visualize more common user journeys across the site, where users might drop off, where users might get stuck in circular journeys. So what you can see here in the slides, it's an image of a diagram of the complexity of how users navigate the information on gov.uk. Daisy Wayne has written a blog post that you can find in the Inside Gov.uk about this work in particular. So you can go there to kind of learn more about the tools that we use to do this visualization. We have also been working with a cross-government startup business service community. So this is a group of people from 10 different departments that provide services, guidance, and policy in this space. And we draw from their knowledge and expertise to better understand user needs, pain points, and opportunities to improve the user journey. We're very lucky that this cross-government service community was in place and it's still running, as it allows us to have access to various different departments working in the user journey. People that are much more connected to end users, the policy space, and also the challenges within. Our user research found that mainly users struggle with not knowing really what to do once they've registered their business, when and where, due to the amount of information out there. This can cause people to miss out on important regulations or support available for their business. We use this user research when developing our prototype to improve this part of the starting a business journey. And it's received positive feedback from user testing so far. So this prototype tries to surface more relevant content and transactions for your business in one place by reusing Companies House public API and information about your business. We're working actually really closely with Companies House to develop this work. And we hope that this will help businesses navigate next steps for their business more easily. But I also wanted to touch on a couple of challenges with this prototype and this work. So one of them is that there is a balance between striking the balance between asking users for more information and the users seeing how this will actually help them. We're working out where in the user journey it's best placed to show people more tailored and relevant content and services for their business. We're also working out how to prioritize which information to show, to distinguish between things that users will have to do as a legal requirement versus what a user can do that could be good for their business, but not necessarily a legal requirement. And the boundaries is not always clear when it comes to the policy and the services. And it's also really crucial that we continue to collaborate and speak to subject matter experts across government to make sure that the content and the services that we surface to users are the right ones. We're asking for people's time and expertise, so sometimes it's a challenge to get access to the right people and their time as well. We also want to make sure that our work meets user needs, so we're thinking about how we can measure the impact of our work. We have hypothesized that through user research, that confidence and time spent doing these things are things that we can measure the value for users. So now we're thinking about ways that we can actually measure those things, user confidence and time spent, so that we can benchmark and see whether what we are doing has a real impact on users. We have also been looking into how might we create ways of organizing and working across organizational boundaries. So for these cross-departmental areas, we need governance models that also spans across departments, and we need to build accountability and ownership. For this work, we've been setting up a cross-government steering group to work with senior civil servants and departments involved. And we're also still actively thinking about different models of working and joining up across departmental boundaries, like service communities. So we still have a lot to learn, and we're making sure that we're testing our thinking with user research and conversations with teams across departments. This work, as Anna's mentioned before, ties directly into our gov.uk strategy, making sure gov.uk is providing trusted, join up, and more personalized interactions for users. We have been documenting all of our work. It has helped us reflect on what's worked and what hasn't, and it's also helping us identify things that we could potentially reuse and apply to other complex user journeys. Here in the image is a kind of a visualization of how we've been documenting findings from user research, prototypes that we test along the way, and iterations we've made. So as it was mentioned before, lots of blog posts to come. We are hoping to talk more in depth of each of these areas through blog posts in the coming months. So yeah, that's me. Thank you. Feel free to message me through Twitter or find me on the cross-government Slack channel if you have any questions later.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ignacia.
You.
I think we're just having a look if there is anything coming in related to questions. Shah, do you see any questions popping up so far?
Well, we've just got one suggestion about getting a link to the blog post on the talks, but none yet, Ignacia. Should we move on to the next presentation? And if there's anything that does come up, we'll try and address it at the end. Or
that sounds like a good idea. Yeah. So next up is Senior Service Designer Thaís, Tozatto Maio. Thaís is going to talk about all the work that is happening in the continuous improvement unit that is part of standards assurance. Over to you. We can see your slides. We can't hear you just yet.
Sorry, I was really trying to find where to unmute myself. Thank you, Martin. Right. As Martin said, I'm part of the Standards Assurance Continuous Improvement Unit. So we are a small team that work across spend controls, service assessments, technology support, and assurance support. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a mission that we're working on with the service assessments team, which is about getting more people to assess. So to recap, service assessments are these peer-to-peer reviews that we do of digital transactional government services to ensure that they meet the service standards. So services that have more than 100,000 transactions a year will come to us at a few points in their development stage, so they can continue building the service and ultimately publish on Gov.uk. And to do the service assessments, we rely on a cross-government pool of volunteer service assessors. And this is very important because it ensures the fairness in the process, it ensures there's not just GDS assessing, and that assessors have experience building services in different departments and can relate to the service team that's coming for an assessment and exchange experiences. But something was happening, especially last year. The problem that we're looking at is that we were really struggling and are still struggling to find enough assessors for the number of assessments that are coming to us. And this was really, really impacted as well with COVID and Brexit services last year. So it was, we were really stretched. And what happened is that small numbers of assessors who were doing a lot of service assessments got really overloaded. So with that, there's a big risk of delaying the launch of services. And if we have to cancel assessments, that has a big impact on the service teams, and we cannot let that happen, essentially. So to look at this piece of work, we collaborated with the digital engagement managers. So they are the people who are operating the service, who organize the service assessments and do the recruitment of service assessors and upskilling on all of that. So our team is very small. It's essentially myself and my core delivery manager. This is our continuous improvement unit at the moment. We're hoping to grow the team soon. And what we did was to collaborate with the digital engagement managers and a lot of the tasks for the project, depending on what area they wanted to learn more about user-centered design and grow. And we also borrowed the amazing Ariana Mihoc to, as a user researcher to help us with user research for a couple of weeks in this. So what we did a survey with assessors, so 91 respondents in total. We interviewed 10 service assessors, and we did a little bit of data analysis around the onboarding. So there were two streams of work essentially in this. One was to look at our existing pool of assessors. So we had a number of service assessors in our records that were not doing assessments for a long time or responding to emails, and it was about, okay, how can we get those people who are trained already to be more active, to do more assessments? And the other way we go about it was how do we speed up the recruitment and upskilling of new service assessors? So from that research that we did, what we learned with existing assessors, the main problem is around time to do assessments and the workload. As I mentioned, they are volunteers, and this is on the side of their day jobs, and everyone was very busy. And especially last year with all the COVID and Brexit services, people didn't have a lot of time. And there's not a lot that we can do about it. There were some things that we could do around team expectations and people feeling really bad about, having a service assessment that takes up quite a chunk of time in a week on the side of the day job and letting their teams down, essentially. So there was something that we could do around helping communicate the benefits of assessments for their delivery managers, etc. And one thing that we could do, which is quite big, is reviewing how assessments are done. Because what happens is we have, it normally takes about half a week of someone's time to do an assessment, from the preparation to the 4-hour meeting a day, really big chunk of time, and write the report, etc. So we could review how that is done, which is something that we're not excluding that possibility yet. We're just, it's quite a chunky piece of work. So we're focusing on more actionable things for right now that we can do with the size team that we have at the moment. And talking about new assessors, what we learned was there are quite a few problems in there. So the time that it takes to complete the onboarding was one of them. The backstage management of the process was quite messy, and some things followed in between cracks in that, and that's due to tools that we use and how the team is structured, etc. So, and one other aspect was a lack of confidence at the end of upskilling journey. So we learned that a lot of people go through the training observations that they have to do in order to become an assessor, and they will be feeling that they're not ready yet. So we looked at all of this, and we still had a problem that some of the communities that we had, even if we looked at the existing sets of assessors, they had less than 30 active people. We did some, after the survey, we cleared up a little bit of people that were inactive or not interested anymore. And we had over like 130 assessments and peer reviews last year, and that is not enough to cover. So we started looking at the onboarding journey and how we can speed up the onboarding. We didn't necessarily have a problem with the awareness and expression of interest. People were coming to become assessors. What we did was quite a few blockers in the latter part of the journey. So training, so we have a 4-hour training that happens once a month. If you miss, then you have another month to wait for the next one. And 2 assessment observations to do. There was a huge backlog of people waiting to observe assessments because there's only so many people that you can fit in a real-time assessment to make it comfortable for everyone, even in a call. And as I said, many people, when they arrived at the end, they were feeling, I'm not ready. Like, who am I to be making a met or no met decision about the service team? I don't have the skills. I don't feel confident. And they asked for more observations, which just made that backlog issue worse. And if our data is to be trusted, is a big if, because one of the problems is that we were not capturing the data correctly about when people came to us, when they trained, when they observed, etc. But if it's to be trusted, that in average took 213 days. It's a really long time. So what we're proposing is a new onboarding journey for assessors. So essentially moving a lot of things from the training to an async learning. So to moving basic content online and a video of an assessment. So we only have 1 real-time observation of an assessment instead of 2 to make, and people can observe an assessment in their own time. Doesn't have to be the 4 hours straight. You can break it down and make it fit around the schedule a little bit more. And reducing the what was the training session, be more focused on soft skills, and be 2.5 hours is what we're going to try instead of 4 hours, and that would increase the chance that someone can fit that in a month. It doesn't cause that delay. We're also, if you zoom in, we're also adding a couple of touch points here. So one is about more support for this async learning, an opportunity for people to exchange knowledge and to essentially just get some support and ask questions, which is a new to assessing Slack channel for the cohorts of people who are training, and readiness confirmation. So an email that is to be sent when at the end of the journey, checking if people are ready, and with a reminder of all the support routes before and after assessment for people. And plan B, which is if people are really not feeling ready at the point, we have this route, which is pairing them up with a more experienced assessor to do the first assessment. So we created some of this content. So we have now 3 basic models about what assessments are, how they work, your role as an assessor, to cover those basics. And we also created some discipline-specific guidance, and that was kind of crowdsourced with very experienced assessors for each discipline. And the plan is to make this bigger, include the opinion of more people, and is about just making it clear what things that you should look for or look out for in assessments, what good looks like in each phase, and giving that more focus for design assessor, user research assessors, lead assessors, etc. And as I mentioned, video of previous service assessments. So we have one right now for an alpha assessment, and the idea is to grow this and then put more examples of service assessments. And this would also help with a few other problems that we know that exist. So if we make these resources widely available, and our idea is to use civil service learning as a platform to host all this content, it could help with the consistency in the assessments, which you know to be a bit of a problem. So especially with the discipline-specific guidance, if we have more of a shared understanding for many assessors of what we're looking for, we can help with that. And we had another issue, which was a lot of people signed up to train to be an assessor, but they didn't want to be an assessor. They were training to understand more about assessments, and they were from service teams, and they just wanted to know what to expect. So if we make those things available, we reduce that that problem. And in the kind of group session that we're calling this skills practice session, we would do a mock wash-up of the video assessment. So if people watch the video, a video of a previous service assessment online, what we can do is to train that wash-up, which is the meeting after an assessment that the panel gets together to discuss and focus on more like behaviors, difficult situations, and assessments, and have that opportunity for people to ask questions about what they learned. In parallel, we're also testing a second idea, which is one digital engagement manager to be responsible for everything that is assessor related. Right now, this responsibility is spread across the team, and there's a lot of handover. So we're testing if concentrating this in one person would make this a bit more efficient and more organized. So where we're at, we this week started on the onboarding of 12 new assessors in this new journey. And at the same time, we have one of the digital engagement managers trialing the assessor coordinator role for 1 month. And depending on what we learn from this trial, what we'll be doing is to evolve this learning content, get it into the right platform, and look a little bit at the tools for the digital engagement managers to manage this process, and also look into that thing that I mentioned earlier about how to help existing assessors have some discussions with their teams about blocking some time in their schedule to do assessments, because there are many benefits that we think can be articulated. And that's me. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Thaís. That's super interesting to hear. Also, the different motivations why people are interested in that in the first place. Fascinating to hear.
I think there's just one question about why do people sign up to be an assessor if it's so much work, and what's the benefit for them or the motivation for signing up?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the motivations that we found in research are around seeing how things are being done in other parts of government and taking those learnings. It's really interesting. You sit in a room and you hear about all the hard work and amazing work of different teams that are in different contexts, dealing with different problems. And there is a lot that you can take back and apply to your own work with that. It's not just like, it's from a curiosity point of view, it's also really interesting. It's just like, oh, I want to know what is being done in MOJ or etc. Like, oh, see all this amazing work happening, but there is a lot of learnings that you can take. And a lot of assessors actually make the effort to do a bit of a show and tell after an assessment to their team. I'm like, oh, I saw this being used in like that in this context, and bring that learning. So we found that that was one of the main motivations.
Great, thank you. So time-wise, I think we're just gonna move on, if that is all right. So next up, we have the GovUK design system, and we will be hearing from Rosie and Tim. Over to you both.
Hello there. Can I just check that everyone can see a blue screen with the design system written on it?
Yes, that works.
Good stuff. Okay, I'll get started then. So yeah, good to see you all. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the design system and the kind of year that we've had in 2020 and the kind and what we've been up to. And then Rosie is going to pick up from there and talk about some research that she ran recently and kind of what our plans are for dealing with the outcome of that research. So yeah, I'm Tim. I'm the head of interaction design at GDS. I work closely with the design system team. And Rosie is our user researcher. She works on the team. And so, yeah, we'll be chatting about the design system for the next 5 or 10 minutes. So for those of you who don't know, the design system is a tool that's used by service teams around the country to quickly make accessible, usable, web-based interfaces for services. So it contains all the code and the styles and the UI components and the design patterns that you would need to kind of assemble a service, and everything's been tested for usability and accessibility. So it kind of helps you to very quickly and consistently build things that look and behave and have the same level of quality as GovUK. It's basically a suite of 3 different products. So you've got the design system itself, which is essentially a website that contains guidance and examples of all the things, the components and the patterns that you might need. And then underpinning that is a front-end code library called GovUK Frontend, and that's where all the accessible performant code lives, and you can kind of download that package and install it into your code base. And then the third tool is called the Prototype Kit, and that is a tool that people can use to kind of very rapidly create HTML, very high fidelity prototypes for use in user research. So those are the 3 products, if you like, and all of those products are underpinned by a kind of by a team that provides support in lots of different ways. So we provide training, we provide day-to-day support on channels like Slack. We're actively involved in our community of users and contributors, and we also help to kind of facilitate and steward contributions from teams into the design system. So we try to make it as easy as possible for people to kind of contribute something that they've built on their service team back into the design system so other people can benefit from that. So that's the design system and what it is. I'll talk a little bit about what we were up to in 2020, not your average year, obviously. So we stayed as busy as ever. On average, we added or substantially improved a style, a component or pattern every month in 2020. So we have this monthly cycle of reviews where an independent group of designers and developers and researchers from across government reviews any new contributions that are being made to the design system, including from our team itself. And then things that go through that assurance process are then published. And so, yeah, we averaged about 1 a month. And that includes things like we had patterns for helping users recover from form errors, you know, when you miss a field out or you type something in an incorrect format and so on. We published a pattern recently to help users have pages on the site that let people choose their cookie settings. Obviously, that's really important for GDPR. To support that, we also published a cookie banner component, which is the thing you can see on the right. And we also published some other components, including something called a notification banner, which is this nice green or blue box that people can use to highlight important information to users or tell them that the results of an action they just performed was successful. We also made significant improvements to existing components. So, for example, we rolled out nice multicolored versions of the tag component for use in more sort of complex user interfaces like caseworking systems and admin systems. And we added prefixes and suffixes to our form elements. So now you can add things like pound signs and per item and kilograms and so on to your form fields. Finally, we updated the guidance on quite a few components, and we're kind of constantly doing that. So for example, we explained to people how they should ask users for whole numbers, which is surprisingly unintuitive and not simple to do it correctly in the code. And we gave people kind of extra little quality of life features, like there's a mode you can put onto lists of content now to space them out a little bit more if you're dealing with very long lists and this sorts of content. And we also rolled out button groups, so now you can line your buttons up easily, nice and horizontally, and it'll treat links in those groups nicely as well and align them vertically. And we added some variants of table captions so that you can caption your tables and use the caption almost as a section heading. So these are this is the range of improvements that we've been making over the last year. We also added a whole new section kind of earlier in 2020 to the design system. So this is community resources and tools. So this is a place where people can submit, and then we link to tools and resources that they've created that help people to use the design system. So not whole new components and patterns, but for example, a port of the design system into a particular templating language, or a copy of the design system that works in Figma or in Sketch, and so on. So we knew that people had been making these things informally, but we hadn't created a way to kind of socialize and share those things. So we have that now. And we tend to add things there every couple of months. People are making those things. So that's really nice. We've been looking at the analytics over the last year. It's been a strange year, so consequently we've had kind of interesting looking graphs. So this is a graph of the downloads of GovUK Frontend from NPM, which is this place where we house the package, and you can kind of see that usage of NPM, usage of GovUK Frontend, it looks like it kind of stalled throughout 2020, and then just recently in the last few months it spiked again. You can kind of almost see, if you squint, what might have happened, which is, it feels like what maybe happened was that throughout 2020, people were not building new things unless they had to. But obviously now we're coming to kind of the new financial year, and we can sense that maybe we're on top of the coronavirus now. And so it looks like activity is picking up again. And I'm kind of hopeful that we can rejoin the trajectory that we were on at the end of 2019. We shall see. Having said that, there was an awful lot of activity in 2020, even though the overall usage didn't change. So there are currently over 2,300 repos on GitHub that are using GovUK Frontend, which is an increase of 75% on this time last year. There are now over 900 live services that use the GovUK design system, and we think that that's about a third of all of them. These numbers are based on some really good work that Matt Hobbs, our head of Frontend, did, analysing all the service.gov.uk subdomains, which was very, very helpful for us. Thanks, Matt. And so in 2020, one of the things that happened was that lots and lots and lots of new government services had to be spun up very, very quickly to deal with different aspects of the coronavirus pandemic. We think that the design system was used to build at least 30, maybe as many as 50. And our economists did a bit of kind of calculation, and they think that that alone probably saved about £10.4 million in avoided costs from, you know, hiring agencies or duplication of effort or things just taking longer to deliver than they otherwise would have done. Some of the examples of services that got built last year to deal with coronavirus are here. So we've got the extremely vulnerable people service, which was getting food to people who really needed it. Actually, a few people from the team joined that team in the early days. There was support for businesses, there was support for individuals, there was the furlough scheme from HMRC. Even some local councils and charities forked the design system and then branded it with their own branding so that they could very quickly spin up information pages. A few examples here. So, busy year, and at the same time that all of that was happening, we were growing the team as well. So at the start of 2020, I think we had about 8 people on the team, which was close to the smallest the team has been in quite a long time, and not really big enough to do everything that we wanted to do and to support our users who were growing at the time. But we had a good year in terms of team size. We managed to add about 10 people have joined the team, including Trang, our product manager. We've got Chris and Charlotte, our interaction designers. We've had Benita, a developer. We've had Imran, a community manager, Calvin, our content designer, Owen, our technical writer, and Sarah, our performance analyst. I'll talk about some of the work of a few of those people later on. So we're up to about an equivalent of a 13 full-time people team now, which is really, really good to see. So I'm going to hand over to Rosie now, who's going to talk about some work she did recently and what we're going to do about the results of that work.
Cool, thanks, Tim. Hopefully everyone can see me.
Yeah.
So yeah, last month we ran a survey to help us understand what people thought of the design system and how they used it. And we also asked people whether there was anything we could do to improve the design system. So we had over 100 responses, which was pretty good, from 16 different departments and 4 local councils. The biggest respondents were from departments such as DWP, DFE, HMRC and MOJ, and about a third of our respondents were interaction designers, and the rest was kind of split between front end and back end developers, content designers, and we heard from some user researchers and service designers as well. So All three of our products have a sort of solid core of people who are using them frequently. And if we look at those frequent users, they're pretty satisfied with our three main products. So the design system, 92% were satisfied. And we asked about the design system website itself. Front end got a satisfaction rating of 88% and the prototype kit got 84%. But when we're looking at the community backlog, which I don't think we've mentioned yet, but the community backlog is basically a space where anyone can suggest or propose new components or patterns to the design system, and also comment on any of the things that were already published as well, to suggest improvements. So yeah, the satisfaction rating to the backlog is slightly less for the backlog, and we can kind of see in this slide there's also a correlation between people using the backlog, and the backlog comments has sort of steadily gone down over time, and so that's interesting. But I think the main thing that came out of the survey and the most interesting thing and important thing for us as a team are the improvements that people suggested. So people mentioned they wanted to see more and better guidance, more components added, sort of related to the satisfaction rating we saw there with the backlog not being as high as other things. And that's mainly related to the fact that people want to see more components added to the design system, so they want to see progression with the backlog. And also related to that as well, where people are not really seeing it as much progression as they'd like, they're sort of less willing to add things or add comments to the backlog. So it's all related. And people are also mentioning that they want to see more development of the prototype kit. So what we're doing about this, I think this is a really nice time to talk more about the newest members of our team. So we've got Imran, who joined our team early in January. And he's our community manager, and he's focusing on re-energizing our community and making the contribution process more productive. And it's safe to say that he's had a really big impact already. We have weekly calls every Friday with people who are interested in design systems, and what our team is up to as well. And that attendance has gone from single figures to I think the latest numbers are around like 22 people attending those calls, which is really good. It's gone up massively. And in the coming months, Imran's focusing on building spaces for those sort of conversations, both on Slack and in our Friday calls. Also making our team's work more open, so more week notes, more blog posts, and more workshops as well with our community members. So generally focusing on what future collaboration looks like, with the end goal to be adding more things into the design system. And we've also got Calvin, who I think might be on this call. Don't want to put you on the spot, Calvin, if you wanted to say hello. So yeah, Calvin is our first full-time content designer we've had on the team for some time now. And he's also really had a really big impact. He's already started improving our guidance, and that should help with contributions. And he's focusing on sort of pulling out the things in our GitHub conversations on the backlog to improve our design system pages and the things that are already published in the design system. And obviously supporting Imran's work as well, and the team's work more generally. And we've also had Sarah join the team in the last couple of weeks. She's our performance analyst, and she's going to monitor how we're doing on support, how people are using the design system, and also looking at our contribution process. I think it's safe to say that we're all really excited that our team has grown so much, and we're all working together to improve the design system. So The next slide, be good to, thanks Tim. So good to mention the prototype kit, which is something that came out of the survey as well, which people wanted to see an improvement on, and we're planning to hopefully, fingers crossed, form a small team that will focus exclusively on the prototype kit. At the moment, we're sort of providing support around the kit, but we only have one person working 1 day a week on it at the moment. And we know that there's lots of things that we'd like to work on and improve around the prototype kit. So I think that's everything. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rosie. Martin, I can see a couple of questions in the chat, which I can try and answer if there's time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
So the first question was, could you speak a little about how you keep track of who's using your design system and do you inform them of changes? So it's really hard. It's a lot harder to track who's using our stuff than it might be for like things like transactional services, because nobody signs in to our service. They can just grab the code, download it and use it, and we might never know about that. So we have a couple of metrics which we use to kind of judge growth, but it's really hard to get absolute figures. But growth is probably more important, really, to know about. So we use things like downloads of GovUK Frontend from NPM. We use things like the number of repos on GitHub, which are dependent on GovUK Frontend. We do some basic server-side analytics on the design system website itself. So this kind of paints a picture to us of like how many people are using our products and whether the number is going up or down. We do inform people of changes through our support channels. So we use Slack and we use GitHub, and we also will use Twitter and so on. I think Imran is going to really focus on the other things that we're not doing yet that we could be doing to help people understand when we've added or changed anything. And then there was one more question, which was how many non-GovUK sites or organizations are making use of the design system? So again, it's really hard to have an absolute response to that, but we do know that there are quite a few. There are lots of councils, maybe it's hovering around the kind of 12 different local government councils that we know of that are using versions of the design system. The NHS design system is actually a fork of the GovUK design system, which they use as the kind of starting point for their own one. And there are a couple of governments internationally, including New Zealand, and I can't quite recall some of the others, who again have like used the GovUK design system as the starting point for their own one. So they forked the code and then adapted it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great. I think there was a third question about what's typically involved in the workshops for the design system.
So what kind of workshops do you mean?
I think that might be related to the fact that maybe I talked about that we want to run more workshops. We have run workshops in the past around sort of how we work with other, I think our last one was about how we work with other design systems, and what that looks like in terms of feeding in from other design systems out there into the GovUK design system. So that's an example of a workshop we've run. And Tim, I don't know if you want to talk about future workshops.
Yeah, so I guess one thing we could talk about is that we have certain kind of sort of monthly ceremonies to do with the working group and assuring contributions and new components and patterns and things like that. I think we're looking to kind of supplement those with more ad hoc workshops around specific themes. So I know Imran has been thinking about mapping and geospatial data and whether we could establish some conventions or some standards around mapping or around the presentation of geodata. So that's one thing that we're looking at. I think as well, he's organising a workshop around some of the guidance that we provide on asking users about their protected characteristics like ethnic background and so on. As you can imagine, that's really complicated stuff and you have to kind of tread carefully and consider lots of different things. So we think that there are different ways that we can engage with our users and our community to kind of help us create the best patterns and guidance around this stuff, and the workshops are one example of that.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time answering those questions as well. So we have 3 presentations still to come. So next up is Ariana talking about remote accessibility research. Over to you.
Hi everyone, so my name is Ariana Mihoc. I'm a senior user researcher at GDS. This week I actually celebrated 4 years of being at GDS. It's been amazing. So I'm going to talk to you about running remote research with people who have access needs. Why do we need to do this? Well, we still need to care about accessibility a lot, and that's because not only it's in our service standard, there's a point there, making sure that everyone can use the service, but also there's accessibility regulations that came into force in 2018, which say that we need to make our website and mobile apps more accessible. I think nowadays, with the pandemic as well, it gave a lifeline to lots of us. Having access to digital services relies so much on those, and so we need to make sure that our services are accessible. Under normal circumstances, we would still recommend face-to-face sessions for accessibility testing, but today, what I wanted to talk about is how we adapted to continue to run accessibility research within GDS, and share some tips on how we can continue to do this even while we're being forced to work remotely. So first of all, we know recruitment is a real issue for many of the researchers, and we discovered that actually contacting a third-party organization is a good way of recruiting the right mix of people and finding people who with access or digital support needs, for example, specific charities working with particular groups. My next tip is to make sure that prior to the session, we get to know personally the participant. Most people might prefer a phone call, or others might prefer an email as a more suitable way of doing this. But it's important as a user researcher to introduce ourselves, to offer the participants some reassurance, to learn what device they prefer to use, learn about communication platform they are familiar with, for example, what video conferencing software do they prefer to use, understand their disability, and how does it affect them, and the assistive technology that they use. A reasonable amount of time that they would be willing to spend on the session. So by understanding how long they usually spend talking on the phone or doing various tasks online, we will be able to judge how long the session should be. And also the participants' availability and preferred time for the session. Some people find it easier to do their sessions in the morning, while for other people with access needs, actually a session later on in the afternoon, or even in the evening, it's a lot better. We also need to allow for extra time at the beginning of the session for any sort of technical setup. That's definitely a must. With all this information that we get from the participant, we will then use it to design each session to meet the participant's requirements. It goes to selecting the communication platform, where we try to use the one that participant is already familiar with. This will avoid additional time and stress for the participant to install or interact with applications that are new to them. There might be some functionality constraints or GDPR compliance that we might find that platforms that we can use within government were restricted to only particular ones. And in this case, it's good to speak with the participant and offer to assist them over the phone or ahead of the session. We're preparing to join the session, use step-by-step instructions on how to do this and install those applications in advance of the actual user research. It's good to remind ourselves to be really patient and supportive and encourage and be encouraging while we're doing this. And it's good to go through this task ahead of the session. Might be good to do this the day before the actual research session. The next thing is that we need to consider running the session when it's most convenient for the participants. Some people might prefer to do the session, as I said, certain times of the day when they can focus better. The other thing to consider, imagine how difficult it might be for people that don't have accessibility needs to sit in front of a computer or over the phone for a whole hour. Imagine if you do have any sort of physical or other cognitive needs, how more straining that sort of task could be. So we need to build the session in such a way so that, that there might be breaks, or we can shorten the session or split it over several shorter sessions, just all this to make it easier for the participant. Next, I think we should opt for the participant preferred device. People with access needs are most likely to have specific settings and technology installed on their devices to have the complete task online. It is therefore even more important to run a usability or content test using the device the participant is likely to use. The most popular communication platforms allow participants to share their screen both on desktop or tablets or mobile devices with little or no interference on the assistive technology. The other thing is, when considering the communication platform, we know that there might be some impact on the accessibility tools that people are using. So for instance, chat messaging during the session can interfere with assistive technology like screen readers that people are using. Also, on some communication platform during a video call, the chat messages are usually under a hidden window. And when people are not familiar with this functionality, they might find it difficult to navigate to it, and it might also distract them from their task. If there are things that we might need to send to the participants, such as a specific page or link to a prototype, it would be good to do this ahead of the session via email or text messages. At GDS, it's actually about a year ago at the start of the pandemic, Annika, who's an accessibility specialist, and myself, we looked at what is the impact of the communication platforms that we were relying to run our user research on. So those were Zoom and Google Hangouts mainly. And we wanted to understand what's their impact on the accessibility settings and software that people with diverse access needs might use. This is kind of how our results were looking like at the time. So those are completely out of date probably, because I know lots of Zoom and Google as well, they updated their products. But I think what would be good for you, consider the sort of communication platform that you're using, and try to simulate the actual research session using over the assistive technology, because this will help you to understand where there might be limitations when you're running the research session. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Next, it's good to encourage people to have their webcam on. As a researcher, I discovered that if I keep my camera on, this does encourage the people that I'm talking to also keep their own camera on. And this is really important for any user researcher, because there might be body language and actions that otherwise we might miss. Also, the whole experience of being able to see the participant, it helps as well with creating a better connection and empathy with the participant, not just from our side, but also from the team that is observing. Can we go to the next slide? Prepare to fail, like it happened to me today, which is sharing the slides. Yeah, so chances are there will be some sort of catastrophe unfolding as we're running the session. The internet connection might crash, the person might struggle to get to your session. It's all okay. Try not to panic. It's all fine. This has happened to many other people before, and it's fine. And then next tip, so if we go to next slide. I think we will need to consider as well the people with low digital skills. So you can still rely on phone interviews for reaching out to people with low digital skills or access needs. But I think we need to recognize that it would be very challenging to conduct usability tests remotely with participants with low digital skills. One way of addressing this might be to check if there's someone within their network who would be able to give them assistance during the session. To make sure we're not excluding anyone, it would be best to prioritize this group of people for maybe for future face-to-face sessions. So keep a note into your backlog that you might want to look again into some of those issues once we can resume to more like face-to-face research sessions. And nevertheless, sorry, the last tip, can move to the next slide, number 10, get support from your team. It's a powerful way to help your team empathy and for the end users actually to facilitate their experience of observing research sessions. We noticed that actually by hosting the sessions online, team members were finding it a lot easier to join in the session because it didn't impact so much on their own work and availability. So it was a lot easier to share the screen with the rest of the team so that they can observe the session. The other thing is, yeah, of course, ask the colleagues to mute themselves and close their camera as they're observing the session. When I was helping to do some of the sessions for Thaís and her team, what we did was that Thaís was sharing her screen. She was the only one that in front of the participant was in the session, and so people were not really influenced by whoever would have been else in the room observing that session, and that made it easier because it meant that there was a participant, myself, and one more colleague in the whole user research session, and everyone else was observing from another meeting. I hope all those are gonna help you. So if we can move to the next one. Thank you, Martin. And I know they're not necessarily kind of like completely new things for user research, but I think it's good to have a reminder of how we could still adapt our approach. And the other thing that I would like you to do is I'm inviting you to join the UK Public Sector Accessibility Research Panel. We're looking for people that work in the public sector and are working on the development and maintenance of websites or applications, digital services within the public sector, and we are creating this research panel so that we can have a significant pool of people that we can invite for user research sessions or participate in focus groups and surveys. To do so, please send us an email at this address, is accessibility-research@digital.cabinet-office.gov.uk, or follow this link. Yeah, so thank you ever so much. I'm looking forward if you have any questions for me. Thank you.
No questions just yet, but thank you so much, Ariana. Should we go
to
the presentation? And I'll keep an eye out for any questions that do come up.
So next up, Steve and Antonia, and they will be talking about the latest work on gov.uk pay. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around till almost the end. I'm Antonia, a product manager on Pay. I've been at Government Digital Service for 4 years and on the gov.uk Pay product team for a year. I'm also joined today with my colleague Steve.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Steve, also a product manager on gov.uk Pay. Been at GDS for about 3 years, used to work on gov.uk, but switched over to Pay in May last year.
So just for those that don't know, Gov.uk Pay is a payments platform for public sector teams to take and manage online payments. We're a service for service teams. So we make it simple for teams to start taking online payments. And this could be for a whole host of things, paying a local authority for their garden waste, or buying a fishing license, or paying a penalty fine. We then provide tools for teams to manage and report on those payments. Taking payments through gov.uk is easier and cheaper compared to the old way of doing things, which I'll just share a little bit about. So the old way is quite messy and to some extent still exists. So to start with, you have services who don't take any form of online payments. So they're relying on like checks, post orders, or maybe taking card payments in person or only over the phone. For the ones that have introduced online payments, how that looks without pay involved is kind of shown on the left here. It requires procurement of a payment provider and then integrating their service and systems directly with that provider. This usually requires technical teams, writing code. It could take between 3 to 9 months of work. It could also mean that procurement and integration work is done every time they want to add another way of paying. So this might be for paying through direct debit. For the public sector, this leads to a lot of duplication, increased costs, commercial and contractual silos, which don't really offer the best value for money. And it can create quite heavy reliance on third parties with back-end finance processes, which can then be difficult to switch from. For the end user, it leads to an inconsistent payment experience that may not be fully accessible. On the right shows where pay fits in. We've built pay to ensure we're providing end users with a consistent, secure, trusted, and truly accessible payment experience. We provide a layer of extraction from the third-party providers, so teams only have to integrate with our technology once. And then when we add additional ways to pay, all services can benefit from those. Sometimes that's just by a switch of a setting in our admin tool, like when we added Apple and Google Pay. And there's no formal procurement needed, so it's super easy to get started and it's entirely self-service. And thanks to our standalone payment links feature, which we'll tell you a bit more about, teams can avoid technical integration work altogether and start taking payments in a day. Just to recap, we've come a long way since our discovery back in 2015, can't even remember now. Last year saw us grow our team and nearly double the number of services using pay. This was from around, I think, 240 to around 500 now, and we've also more than doubled the number of payments being taken. It's used by over 160 different organisations and for many critical services, including Her Majesty's Passport Office for applications and Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office's Emergency Travel Document Service. In 2020, we took over 7 million payments, totalling £473 million. And that was around over £1 million per day with an average payment value of between £60 and £70. I'll hand over to my colleague Steve to share a bit more about some recent changes for services and how we helped.
Yeah, so I'm going to challenge myself to read out this alliterative statement and see if I get it right. So yeah, I just want to talk today about call centres, common components and the coronavirus crisis. Yes, we did it. So if you cast your mind back to January 2020, this picture here shows how a lot of call centres worked. You know, people sat together in offices, picking up the phone to talk to people. I'm sure we all remember what that was like. And these call centres do a really important job because they help people get their queries answered or things paid for. And even though government services have shifted to online channels over the last 20 years, the telephone still provides a vital service for some people. What's good about taking payments in a call centre is it provides a secure environment in which to do that. So as people read out their card numbers, a call agent might need to repeat that back to the user, and you need to do that in an environment where people can't overhear you. You also need to make sure that your computers are sort of secure, so they'll use local networks with particular protections from people outside. And call centres operate in line with payment card industry standards and PCI regulations to protect people's personal and financial information. And then this happens in March last year, the first stay-at-home order is announced. So many of these vital call centres need to continue operating, but people aren't able to go into the office. And like many of us, the front room or a kitchen or a bedroom became the office for people in call centres. So this required processes to be changed overnight and also meant that the equipment that people relied on wasn't available. Where that couldn't be supported, we've learned services having to reduce their provision, for example, only taking payments on a Monday when staff are coming into the office. And as we mentioned, those offices were a protected, secured environment in which teams could ensure that payment card industry security standards were adhered to. For example, controlled access to the building meant that no one could sneak in and overhear call agents reading out card numbers. But this protection is lost when your staff are distributed across the region and working from home, that you can't ensure the same high degree of security like before. In particular, the Environment Agency were worried about other people in a call agent's home. So if you imagine someone sat at a computer, maybe like answering the phone, and they're sort of like typing in card details, they were a bit worried about who else might be in that home, like looking over someone's shoulder, because that's not something they can really control, and they really wanted to be able to mitigate this risk. And so this was the need that service teams had. As a service administrator, I need to hide users' card numbers in MOTO services. MOTO services are the telephone payment ones, so that details can't be stolen when call center agents are working from home. This video is not, yes, the video is about to play. So this is what it looks like. We developed a feature that means that you can like mask the card details so that other people can't see them. You can enter the card number, you just can't like see it. And so this meant that the security teams could be comfortable with payments being processed at home. I'm just going to pass back to Antonia now.
So that was really good for kind of services who'd already integrated with our technology on Pay, or our API basically, which in short allows two applications to talk to each other. But for services who hadn't done that and they didn't have technical teams, and there also just wasn't the time to start integrating with one, you know, this was the case for I think Home Office and the Maritime Coast Guard Agency. They basically started using some existing functionality we had, which was payment links, to take another approach. So this is what things look like for them. When a user needed to make a payment, they rang up the call center, they provided details as Steve was sharing. And at other times, some agents would type those details into physical card terminal devices to process the payment before firing off a confirmation email. And then obviously without the office environment and without those physical devices, the whole ability to process payments disappears. So how did they fix it? They did something quite clever where they just did some small adaptations to their service, altering some of the steps, and were basically able to remove the agent having to take the card details and process the payment over the phone entirely. So instead, the agent could send an email to the user, which included a payment link, and the user would access that payment link provided by gov.uk Pay and make the payment, like finish the whole step and make the payment online. So once the agents had validated that the money had come through, they could then acknowledge receipt of the funds to the user. Why was this a good option? It was like really quick and easy to set up for them. There was no contract or minimum terms. We're free to use. We just kind of pass on transaction fees from the provider, and it's PCI compliant, as Steve was mentioning before. So we also know use of payment links here enabled Home Office to reduce the number of telephone payments overall. So for example, they could enable users to pay online 24/7, which had previously been limited to taking over the phone by call centre working hours of 9 to 5. And then back to Steve for one further
Thank you. So yeah, what Home Office and a couple of other teams have managed to do is use payment links to sort of plug a gap and adapt their service so that they could continue taking payments. But they knew that that wouldn't be what they needed to do going forward. You know, they'd have to sort of unplug that gap and make it better. And over the course of the pandemic, we've heard from like lots of organizations, particularly local authorities, who might have IT teams that are stretched on other things, so can't actually integrate with our APIs, or there are central government teams who won't have access to a technical team for a while, so they also can't integrate with our API. And that means that they can't start using our telephone payments feature. So we wondered how we might help them out using our payment links product. And this is what we've come up with. So we worked with this on Home Office, a couple of other organizations, and some small councils too. And it's basically a feature that works a bit like telephone a bit like payment links, but allows you to sort of spin up a call center, as it were, without having to integrate with our API. So what it means is that a team can create a payment link with a title, a description, and then the value of the payment. And then they can assign that link to certain users who are call agents who can access this and start processing transactions for people. It just means that they don't have to integrate with our API, and all of that functionality is out of the box. All the pages are hosted and looked after by us, so they're accessible for call center staff and can scale with demand, and access to the links is secured behind a user account with multi-factor authentication for call agents, meaning that only verified call agents can initiate payments. And while we know that online can work well for a large portion of the population, we also know how important the telephone is as a channel for anyone with accessible needs or who isn't able to read, for example. Maintaining telephone channels is costly for a few reasons. You've got to hire staff, you've got to have specialist equipment, you've got to look at security and compliance standards, and it exposes a bit more risk. And so given the extreme overnight changes due to the pandemic, we're surprised that we didn't need to support more changes or needs arising, which likely suggests that there's loads of public sector services out there that have this need, but maybe don't know that we exist. And so we'd really like to hear from teams or services who may have needs around telephone payments or assisted digital. You can get in touch with us on cross-government Slack or by email there. And that's that. Thank you very much.
Ooh, QR codes are the thing today. Fantastic. Thank you so much. How are we doing regarding questions, Lisa and Shah?
We haven't got any questions at the moment, but I am keeping an eye just to see what does come up. Yeah, I think we should go ahead. To the next presentation. Over to you, Martin.
And immediately over to Harry. Harry Voss is going to talk about the discovery that he's been working on the last few months. So tell us about all the information that people leave in forms and elsewhere. Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Martin. Hi, everyone. I'm Harry. I'm a senior product manager at GDS. Since December last year, we've been trying to learn more about the problems that the public sector face when collecting information from members of the public and businesses. I want to share a bit about what we've learned and what we hope to do about it. Most public services collect information from people using PDF forms. PDFs are usually harder to use than online forms, and they're hard to make accessible. I'm going to play a screen recording of an inaccessible PDF form. While it doesn't accurately represent the experience of a blind or partially sighted person, it gives you an idea of the problems. It shows a screen reader going through input fields completely detached from their labels, making it impossible for a blind person to know where to put their information.
Bullet part 52 civil procedure norms, paragraph 5.7 of the practice direction advice. Clear, clear, full, clear, should, clear, be fully, completed, and clear, returned, debug, clear, court, clear, together with a copy of bullet wherever possible you should provide documentary proof of the information you provide. Failure to do so, clear, label your application, clear, have you obtained any estimate of the costs of providing a transcript number, clear, transcribers, clear. If yes, please provide a copy of the estimate, clear, about a case, case/claim number, clear, appeal number, clear, date of order you are, clear, appealing/intent to appeal, clear, clear, the order. Bullet part 52 civil procedure norms, paragraph 5.7 of the practice direction advice. Clear, clear. Bullet part 52.
So worse still, in addition to all of those problems, this is a form that people need to use to get justice. and to do so on a low income. So why are we mostly still using PDF forms? Well, there's lots of digital investment in services that are used a lot, but there's less digital investment in services that are used less. In fact, most government services are used fewer than 1,750 times per year, and there's thousands of them. So what are your options for collecting information on a small budget? Well, Gov.uk guidance recommends turning existing PDFs into an open document if it's to be edited, such as a form. While open documents might have a greater likelihood of being accessible, unfortunately, they're not always easy to use. I'm going to play another screen recording of an inaccessible and hard to use open document form. Again, whilst it doesn't accurately represent the experience of a blind or partially sighted person, it gives you an idea of the problems. The screen reader is only able to read the title of the form and recognise a PNG image with no alt text. Aside from this, the rest of the form is not recognised, making it very inaccessible. The text is incorrectly formatted, making it hard to read for sighted people too.
LibreOffice, plant products for registration form ODT, window, edit text insertion and log text. Registration for place of destination for inspection of plant health control commodities imported into the UK. As keyboard focus, you are currently on a text area inside a group. To exit this group, press Ctrl, Option, Shift up arrow. E, L, A, N, dash, E, R, O, D, U, C, T, S, dash, E, O, D, dash, R, E, T, R, N, T, I. Image 1 PNG, O, N, dash, N, O, R, N, space, dash, space, L, I, B, R, E, O, N, N, I, C, E, space, B, O, C, U, M, E, N, T. Group 40. To exit this group, press line 14. To exit this group, press it. LibreOffice, plant products for.
So that gives you an idea of some of the problems. In addition, you've got interactive form elements breaking when open documents are created and opened by different apps. You've got form labels and guidance that are locked, but are actually often editable. Layouts and fonts can change dramatically and confuse users. Users can't open documents on iPhones or iPads unless they have an app. And open document forms have no formatting for Mac users without an Office suite. So what are the alternatives? Is it possible to complement a PDF form with an accessible online form on a small budget? Let's assume 75% of people would stop emailing in PDF forms and start using an online form, and that 25% continue posting in paper forms. Processing an online transaction is around £2.50 cheaper compared to processing a PDF form sent by email. This because online forms reduce the time it takes to manage individually attached PDF forms. By offering an online form, a service that is used 1,000 times per year can save around £1,875 per year. If the service is happy breaking even within 5 years, they have a budget of just over £9,000 to spend on producing an online form. In this example, we won't look at the very niche low volume revenue generating services like paying specific taxes or fines where they'll have a bigger budget. So can a service that's used 1,000 times a year produce an online form for less than £9,375? It costs over £1 million to hire or contract a team to build a simple bespoke digital service, so that's no good. It costs around £60,000 for one public servant to use a commercial off-the-shelf form builder for a year, so that's no good either. And it costs at least £40,000 to have government's internal specialists design a form using a form builder. That's still over budget. So where does that leave a team with a small budget? Now, I realise this chart is like comparing a bespoke hand-built Bentley with a mass-produced Vauxhall Corsa, and each of these options produce very different outcomes, but it gives you an idea of how unaffordable any of these options are for a service that's used 1,000 times a year. So there is no way to produce an accessible, easy-to-use online form on a small budget. For example, you looked at the budget to produce an online form used 1,000 times per year. If it's used just 100 times per year, they need to be able to produce an online form for less than £937.50. It needs to be 10 times cheaper. Until this changes, most government forms will remain as PDFs or open documents. Until this changes, most government forms remain hard to make accessible and usable. So what can we do about it? Well, frankly, nothing unless we get funding. If we do get funding, we could develop a service to make it economically viable for teams across government to make accessible low-volume online forms. So how can you get involved? We want to hear from public servants who have to collect information from users on a small budget. You can email us at collecting-users-info@digital.cabinet-office.gov.uk. You can also message me on Twitter @VossageRoll, and you can read more about our work on this site. I'm going to post the link in the chat in a second, but I will welcome your questions, please.
Great, thank you so much, Harry. This is fascinating, and those videos you captured are really impressive, shocking, of course. Are there questions? We'll wait another second, but I'll be pointing towards all the different. Oh, there's one question now. There's one question now. Was this simple form stuff not looked at previously? Was there a question?
Yes, good question. It was looked at previously. There was a team that ran a discovery across all of the potential customers of government as a platform at the Government Digital Service. And they found that this problem was the sort of biggest problem that hadn't yet been solved, that was common across so many different services. And they then did a more focused discovery on collecting information from users. And they came up with a bunch of different proposals and tested those in an alpha. And they found that they could produce simple forms on a low budget, but they were mostly looking at medium volume services rather than the really low volume services at sort of 1,750 forms, transactions per year or less. So yeah, that was paused about 3 years ago. And yeah, so this is very much looking at building on that work. There's another question here. Why is it so expensive to use a government-built form builder? Was it 40,000 on the graph? So that really looks at so the product itself. You know, anyone can use, and there's a few different form building teams across governments, but they are taking a service-oriented view that they are providing a service to operations teams with low volume services. And mostly medium volume services actually, and that they are helping to design those services, which it works for the sort of medium volume services, but it's not so cost effective when you get to some of those really low volume services, as I've showed. So yeah, £40,000, that's covering like a very small team of designers working with those operations teams for sort of between 6 and 10 weeks to create and test that form. So it's like I said, it's, you know, comparing very different products, but obviously that's going to get a good outcome because you're going to have a well-designed form.
Great. I think we should wrap it up here, where I think we said we would close a bit earlier than the clock is saying now. So thank you everyone for presenting. Thank you everyone for asking these questions or for just listening. So there are quite a few blogs. We can drop all those links into the chat window as well in a second. You can subscribe to our blogs, and then you will never ever miss a blog post anymore. So that's the GDS blog, the Inside Gov UK blog, the Accessibility in Government, the Design in Government, and the Services in Government blog. So plenty of stuff to read. I think in total it must be thousands of blog posts by now. And you can also follow GDS and see more of our team's work on Instagram and as well on Twitter. That's at GDS team on both platforms. But from that, we are curious to hear how this was. Was this a useful session? Was this interesting? Do you have ideas how to improve as well this format? Do let us know. There is a feedback form you can use, and we would very appreciate any kind of feedback. And I think that's it. Thank you for joining. Thanks for participating, and see you all soon somewhere. Thanks so much.